Welcome to the Syndicate Room. I am Drew, that is Reese, and Val from AdValorem is our producer. Today we are using Humanoid as a physical AI case study, how a tech investor separates capital raised from deployment proven.
You know the pattern. A robotics company raises a huge round. The valuation becomes the story. The robot becomes a photograph. The customer agreement becomes a forecast. Slow down before the headline turns a plan into a result. Read the investor list as a capability map, not as a popularity contest. Can a robot move? Can it do the task? Can a customer pay for the task? Those are not the same question. A smooth demo can hide a rough installation, a brittle workflow, or a cost structure that only works in a slide deck.
And when a strategic customer says thousands of robots are planned, do you hear thousands installed? No. A commitment is a signal. A live fleet is evidence. The distance between them is where the underwriting lives.
You can be right about the long-term labor story and wrong about the next financing. You can respect Bosch's manufacturing role and still ask what the first production unit costs. Do not let strategic names substitute for operating data. Here is the permission slip. You do not have to predict the winning humanoid form. You have to price the distance from a robot announcement to a repeatable deployment loop. That is less cinematic and far more useful as a research process.
Think of the round as buying 4 proofs. First, the machine can perform a bounded task. Second, a factory can produce it repeatedly. Third, the software can orchestrate a fleet. Fourth, a customer can measure a payback that survives contact with maintenance, downtime, and supervision. Notice the shift? The headline asks, how big is the round? The allocator asks, what evidence does this round purchase? In capital-intensive technology, the next proof point is often more informative than the current valuation. The Reuters report is clear about the caveats. Customer deployments, mass manufacturing, and the planned Schaeffler rollout were intended actions, not completed outcomes. That sentence should sit at the top of every robotics memo. Name the evidence, then name the promise.
Our research desk published a piece on this called Robotic Startup Humanoid Raises $152 Million Series A Round at $1.35 billion Valuation. Link in the show notes. Use the article for the reported facts, then build your own evidence ladder for deployment. Step 2. Measure the robot at the task level. What task is it doing? How many minutes does a human still supervise? What happens when the object, lighting, layout, or exception changes? Replace autonomous with a numerator and denominator. Successful tasks divided by attempts over a real shift.
Add the cost line. Track hardware cost, installation, maintenance, energy, software, and human oversight per useful hour. A lower sticker price does not help if the robot needs a human shadow on every task. The unit is not the robot. The unit is the completed job. Step 4. Stage-gate the thesis. Set a review date around the first beta deployments. Then write what would upgrade, hold, or downgrade the case. Upgrade on repeatable uptime and customer payback. Hold on impressive pilots without economics. Downgrade when planned volume keeps moving right.
If successful task rates plateau, if human supervision does not fall, or if maintenance erases the labor savings, the deployment thesis needs a reset. That is a much better question than, is the robot humanoid enough?
The question is not, will Humanoid become a giant? It is, what must be true at the next customer site for this financing story to become an operating story? That is the question a disciplined tech investor can actually revisit.
Before the next physical AI round lands in your feed, run the playbook. Label the milestone, measure the task, map the dependencies, stage-gate the evidence. You can do it in 10 minutes with a public article, a spreadsheet, and one brutally honest review date.
This week, while the funding story is still fresh, build a one-page deployment ladder for any robotics company you follow. Put the first customer site,
the first repeatable task, and the first payback test on the same page. That is how a headline becomes a research process. The valuation is not the milestone. The robot is not the deployment. The deployment is not the economics. The loop is the thesis. One more operator test. Compare the promised fleet with the first boring shift. Who installs the robot? Who resets it? Who owns the exception queue at 2 in the morning? If those answers are vague, the deployment is still a story, not a system.
When you review the story, ask one last question. What changed on the floor, not just in the press release? That question keeps the process anchored to evidence.
Put that review date on the calendar before you close the tab. When the first field report arrives, compare it with the promise you wrote down today. That is the habit that turns attention into an edge.